Mythos-busters, investigating the mystery, monsters, and madness of Arkham Horror, the card game.
Hello and welcome to episode 79 of Mythos-busters. I'm Sean, and joining me on this fine indoorsy evening are my friends. We got the full crew tonight. Let's start with Ian tonight. Hey Ian.
Oh, hi.
How are you? You're still hale and healthy?
Well, so far, yeah. And just on behalf of everyone in the world, just what the fuck is going on? We recorded 2 weeks ago, and it feels like 2 years ago at this point.
I was about to say, this week has been a super long year.
Yeah.
What a year this week has been.
It really has been.
Good Lord.
And, yeah, I don't know what else to say other than that, but yeah. Just been locked up all together for a week or so now, and yeah.
I got halfway through the week, and my dad texted me and my siblings and was like, "Hey, how's everyone holding up during the self-quarantine or whatever?" And my siblings chimed in like, "Oh, work has stopped. We're getting paid. Blah blah blah. It's lovely. We're lucky." And I'm like, "I work from home, so what quarantine?" Business as usual, aside from just. Ugh. Not being able to get outside is a thing.
Yeah, and I'm like, people who know me, I'm very introvert, homebody, etc. But this is already testing even me because, and it's not even so much just like changing what I'm doing, although there is the fact that like the kids are home at all times. But it's also just like the psychological thing, like almost a claustrophobic thing of like, I can't go anywhere. Like, even if I didn't want to go anywhere, I can't, like it's kind of like where you don't want to go to a party, but like,
it's nice having the option.
Yeah, it's nice having the option, but it's like, yeah.
But that same party you find out you didn't get invited, you're like, well, fuck, what?
Yeah.
I wasn't going to go, but.
Yeah, exactly. This is, I still want to be invited, but I'm not going to go.
Yeah, exactly.
True story. Hey Nick, how are you?
I'm well. How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm surviving. It's been, like we said, it's been a week.
Yeah. I totally agree that having the kids around all the time, which I mean, Roland is always home, but having my daughter home all the time too, Ellie, like that's been throwing me off a little bit because it's like, oh my gosh, there are two of you now, like whoa. But it's also kind of worked out because now they will entertain each other for a few hours before they
until someone starts crying.
Yeah, exactly. So for those couple hours, I've actually been able to get down to the computer and do some work, as we'll talk about later. So
nice. Mm-hmm. And of course, then we have Scott with us as well. Hey, Scott.
Oh, hi.
You have to have the most interesting stories among us from the past week.
Yeah, it's I did some overtime today at work because I think the mandatory overtime is going to start pretty soon. But yeah, it's
I don't know why I laughed. That's awful. But thank you for your service.
Well, no problem. Yeah, I don't know. It's I don't know how to feel. It's very different.
That's the first sign of burnout. Take a nap.
Yeah, it's whew. Yeah, I don't know. But being locked up with my son is actually, I don't know, it's been kind of fun spending time with him. But
like, I get it. I get everyone, especially those who are trying to do productive work from home, and now suddenly your kids are upon you.
Yeah.
Like the Moria goblins.
Yeah.
I get it, because I have a kid, and she was young not that long ago, but mine's like 12 now and is super self-sufficient, so I kind of have it super easy. So, it's so.
Yeah, my son requires like we built this like poster board with a bunch of magnets of all these different activities he can do. So when he's like, "What do I do now?" we can like go over to your board, and like there's like 30 different activities that he can choose from. So that's helped a lot.
And he doesn't just stare at it for 10 minutes and then ask again, "What do I do?" Because that's what my kids would do.
Yeah.
I had to do the teenage version of that. We're like, all right, Lily, you're home. You cannot be on your phone the whole time. Tropical phones now live on the island, and we have Post-it notes up on the fridge of all the different things one might occupy one's time with. So And
Grindad's Overwatch ranked rank or something. Yeah.
I mean, yeah, that definitely has happened. So
work on Dad's Stardew farm. Yeah.
That is not even a joke. She's just taken over my game at this point on Stardew, so it's basically hers. What I did do is get her started on Breath of the Wild, and that has been a joy to watch because it's the first like real game she's actually taken to. So it's a good time.
That is a good isolation game.
Oh yeah,
that's like if she plays that 40 hours a week, that's 5 weeks of entertainment.
Yeah.
Tell her that Scott missed one of the Korok seeds, and then just see if she goes for all of them.
She hasn't even gotten the maracas yet, so we'll see. All right, anyway, believe it or not, this is not a podcast about the coronavirus quarantine, though I'm sure it'll come up again. We've got a fun episode for you guys tonight. We've got a little housekeeping up front. And then our main topic tonight, we're going to revisit, in these secluded times to come, some other Lovecraft games that you might want to look at. This is something we talked about back in episode 8, and we wanted to revisit it again. Seemed like an appropriate time. So we'll have that list and discussion of Bloodborne games. Sorry, well I guess you know which one I'm bringing to the table.
We'll probably get there at some point.
Wipe the board. It has been 0 episodes since Sean mentioned Bloodborne, and then of course we'll round it out with Tentacle Time. But before we get to any of that, I do want to take a second again to remind anyone who's listening to this as a recording on our podcast, if you feel it, and particularly in these times. If you want to come listen to us record live and interact and chat at us while we do it, come join our Discord. It's discord.me/mythosbusters, or if you have trouble with the link, message us on our Facebook, shoot us an email at mythosbusterspod@gmail.com, and we'll get you an invite. But aside from being able to listen to live episodes, it is just a fantastic little community. Everyone is so nice, and like as mods, we have to do like next to nothing. It is just a paradigm of a great online community. So even if you just want to hop on and chat with people about Arkham, come on and do it. Nick, you've got a little bit of housekeeping up front here that I wanted to get to.
Yes. So listeners, and specifically anybody who entered and won a contest in the last X amount of months, we fucked up. And part of that is me. Most of that is me.
I'll own my part.
Well, I mean, there's been multiple moving parts to this. Like, we have moved Swagged around from one place to another, and we don't have an easy way to collate. Now we do, but we haven't had an easy way to collate the addresses of people who we owe stuff to. So if you are a contest winner and you've been promised something and you haven't received it, please email us and let us know as soon as you can. And we will get that corrected now that we have better things in place to keep track of that sort of thing. So we owe you stuff and we want to get it out there to you. I'd love to blame it on the coronavirus, but this has been going on longer than that. So
no, but we get to use the coronavirus to our advantage because now we have more time to get caught up on it.
Exactly. So yeah. So send us email if we owe you a contest prize and you haven't gotten it. Or if, I'm pretty sure that we're good on the board member swag stuff, but if you're a board member and you're like, I thought I was supposed to get this, like, feel free to email us and we'll either send it to you or we'll clear that up with you. So yeah, just reach out and we'll take care of it.
And my part of the failure, I just want to amend. Board members are still owed the exploration deck topper. That is in the works. By me. Yeah, it's okay. So, guys, before we get to the meat of the show then... Oh, and that's mythosbusterspod@gmail.com to contact us about your prize. So what have y'all been playing lately? Ian, let's start with you.
Well, so I played through the latest scenario where gods dwell with my 3 campaigns, and I'm batting 0 for 3. All 3 failed. It is quite tough, true solo. When we get to that particular pack, I'll talk more about it because I don't want to spoil, but oh boy, yeah, that's really tough, true solo. And so I was like, okay, I better start another campaign so I could get another shot at it. So I've started Wendy and Zoe through the dream side of the Dream Eaters. And I picked them because they're kind of my wrecking crew. Like, if I get mad at a campaign, then I'll bust that duo out because I've had great success with them. Obviously Zoe's just really good at what she does and can just rack up a crazy amount of resources against the swarm in this campaign. And then Wendy obviously is also a really great investigator. And with some of the tools that are out now, she's actually, at least in 2-player, a pretty decent clover. Like if you're talking about lockpicks, you're talking about God, I'm blanking now, winging it, and sharp vision, which is the new 1 XP skill that you can commit to get basically 2 clues if you succeed by 2 or more.
How about fortuitous discovery?
Yeah, fortuitous discovery. Like there's just, for that survivor mold, and because Wendy obviously has the mulligan to like get rid of bad draws, like she's just been pretty efficient. And then also on the Zoe side, I'm kind of running her a little bit flexy because she doesn't need that much to kill efficiently. So I've devoted a little bit of card space to like Sixth Sense and Scene of the Crime and those kind of cards. And so, yeah, they're doing really well so far. So my plan is to see whether I can get to where gods will dwell with them and be way more successful than I have been so far. And so then I started an accompanying side. So on the other side, I have a Kelvin and Norman team, which is odd, but did okay so far in the first scenario. So we'll see how they do.
Fun. I really want to talk about who is everyone's beatdown team.
Ursula Solo.
Not surprised at all.
Yeah.
Cool. Nick, what you been playing?
I have played exactly one. I've actually talked about Arkham more than I've played it in the last couple weeks. I played one game of Arkham. I don't want to go into the details because that game is part of my brand new Achievement Hunter series. I started one of the 2 campaigns that I talked about on the first episode of Achievement Hunter, that being the Finn one. And I don't want to spoil anything, but it didn't go as expected. So you can listen to that one in the next couple weeks when that releases on our RSS. But Solo Finn going through the Night of the Zealot, to return to the Night of the Zealot, trying to get as many of the achievements as possible, and then the ones that are impossible for him to get in that campaign, I will be running a solo Diana to get to kind of play cleanup and get the rest of the achievements. I say cleanup, but that's going to be the main show because the solo Diana campaign is the expert Return to Night of the Zealot.
Oh, shit.
And that's why I chose Diana, because I'm hoping that her ability to cancel and like bag control can help for those tests that I have to make. But the more I look at the deck, the more I'm like, I made a huge mistake. So we'll see.
Well, if you need a Diana correspondent, let me know.
I might.
I've run a few builds.
I've never played her before, so playing her first time expert. Yes, I haven't played her yet. So playing her first time expert is going to be a wild ride.
Who are you?
So Nick, just because last time you mentioned how you forgot that Tommy shuffles back in assets,
I know she draws a card. I know she draws a card.
And gains a resource.
Okay, that I didn't know.
Okay. So, funny story about my first ever time playing Diana. I played it through, I forget what scenario I was playing. I think it was, the first scenario of the Circle and Done. Witching Hour, is it?
Yeah, Witching Hour.
Anyways, I played through it, and Sean, I took your build through it, and I played through it, I got to the end, I was like, okay, that wasn't too bad yet. Like, things worked and stuff like that, and I realized the entire game I had forgot to draw a card or gain a resource when I played it cancel. Like, I just tucked it under Diana. And then, so the next scenario, I played it the correct way. I was like, wow, she's really good. Surprising how that works.
Just a testament to how good she is that you can play her at half speed and still work.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Cool. Scott, I know a little bit about what you've been playing.
Yes. Okay. Well, before that, one of the things, not with you, that I've played, also a Zoe campaign, Ian, and I've been doing a Hungering Blade Zoe deck through the Dream side of the Dream Eaters. Also, as a side note, I I know people were talking about this in community, like, ooh, I really like the four scenario campaign. I'd like to see more of that because it's nice to like have a quick campaign. And I was always like, nah, no, I'd like the full campaigns. But now that I've played each side as a solo, as a just like not solo, but as a side, I'm like, oh, yeah, I kind of see this. Like, you get your deck up to speed after like scenario 1, and then you got a couple more, and then you can just move on to a new deck. So I understand, but
and if you're playing it as an interconnected campaign, you can test twice as many.
Yeah, exactly.
It's pretty bitchin'.
So yeah, the 3-player game that I have online, I've been playing a Hungering Blade Zoe, and it's super fun.
The Zodiac Killer.
Yeah.
Oh, jeez.
Well, there it is.
Yeah, okay, there's the deck title. You're welcome.
Yeah, and putting, is it reliable or well-maintained? I always mix the two up. Which one gives you the +1?
Reliable.
Reliable. Putting 2 of those on the Hungering Blade, and then also having when you're swinging
I
it.
didn't think about reliable.
Yeah, and when you have it at like all 3 attached, you're swinging
Oh my god.
like your
+5.
base attack is 9,
Oh, Jesus.
and you're doing 2 damage.
That's
So,
insane.
yeah, choppity chop chop. And then Sean, we had another
Yes.
game of our Skids and Daisy.
Boy, did we.
Oh boy.
That might have been one of the more roller coastery games of Arkham I've ever played. Like, TNA tends to be like, we either blaze through it or just get murdered. Mm-hmm. This was like, maybe. No. Whoa, maybe.
Yeah.
No, yeah. Like, it was...
It reminded me of a curling match, when they're like, yeah, no, yeah.
I know exactly what you mean. The skip was yelling at us real hard.
Yeah, and it was just,
That's a curling joke for you guys.
Nick, you're in Minnesota. You should know it. Anyways, I don't blame Ian for not laughing. Yeah, if you haven't seen that episode, check out. I uploaded to YouTube today. Should be there, and on our Twitch. Possibly one of the. I think it was the best, or like as far as best game, most entertaining of this run of TNA so far. I mean, it's only the 3rd scenario. Like it's the 3.
Oh,
yeah.
sure.
But
I
it's
guess-
up against that Excelsior run where we pulled 3 tentacles and a -4 in succession. So
Yes.
you know it's good.
That one that crashed and burned. Yeah.
Yes,
Twice.
2 times.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, sorry. And last thing about my Zoe run. In a single game, I triggered Zoe's Elder Sign twice.
Nice.
Oh shit!
Where I actually dealt
4
extra damage.
Oh goddamn!
Yeah,
That's impressive.
I
never
think
see that thing during an attack.
I know, right? And it happened to me twice in one game, and I was like, oh god, here come the tentacles. Anyways. Sean, what have you been playing?
Well, for my part, I'm also, oddly enough, apparently it's just something in the Mythos Busters drinking water. I am running a Zoe campaign. I'm running her with a new Preston build that I am loving through the Web of Dreams side. And then I've got Diana and Silas in the Dreamlands. And the campaigns are really cool. Is the Dreamweaver the number 4 in the Web of Dreams out for some people?
No.
Okay.
It's been spoiled, I think. Like,
Okay,
a
spoiled.
person has a pack. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay, so
Yeah.
I'm just like, I'm so close to being able to actually finish these campaigns, but I can't quite get there. And I don't know. Anyway, it's been really fun. My Zoe build also uses the Hungering Blade, so again, I guess there's just something in the water. It's the Zodiac Killer deck.
We're
But it
hungry
is a
for
little bit more, yes, it is a little bit more flexy. So she's running Rites of Seeking and a cheeky one of Drawn to the Flame, just because I really like that in Zoe.
Yeah,
It's
mine's
been
murder,
fun.
murder, death, kill.
Yeah,
We compared lists, and I had 0 clue tech.
yeah. I have really tended to build more flexy decks for two-handed nowadays.
Yeah, same.
Because I find that I find myself in fewer like dire scrapes when I do it that way. You can still specialize, but I feel like 2-player still is a little bit closer to solo in that you kind of want flexiness in both investigators, so that way you can spread out when you need to.
I would agree.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
Anyway, my Preston build is one that I'm really excited about and has been fun, and you'll hear more about that in some additional Mythos Busters content that Scott and I have been preparing. It is a deluge of content during quarantine time, so hopefully you'll enjoy that. So pay attention.
Quarantine Con 2020! Woo!
And then beyond that, yeah, just TNA. It's a really good game. Go watch it. I think I might turn it on next time I'm building decks, just to relive the emotional experience.
Yeah, I need to rewatch it. It was ups and downs. Oh boy.
I have that Excelsior run playing all the time in the background at my house.
I bet you do.
Just a 1 minute loop of that turn.
Just that clip.
All right, so then let's move it on into the show proper here. Ian, what patron news have we?
Okay, well, thanks as always to our board members, Chris B, Chris H, and Chris U. That's our conglomeration of Chris's. Morton, Jared, Ian, Kyle, Philip, Dave, Elbilio, Nathan, Chad, and Robert. Thanks so much for your support. And special shout out to a random patron this time around is Queen Tara. Thanks you, Queen Tara, for your support as well. And a reminder to go visit mythosmerch.com if you'd like to pick up some comfy or cool Mythos merch while you are quarantined. And one announcement is that our patron exclusive merch is unlocked, which we announced the past couple of episodes, I think. But the exciting news is it's going to be available the week of March 22nd, which is this next upcoming week, which means that any patron at the middle manager, which is $5 level or above, will be able to go to mythosmerch.com and buy and access that patron exclusive merch. And there's going to be a kind of reveal / teaser post on our socials soon to announce when they're available and what they are and that kind of thing. So keep your eyes peeled for that. Other stuff. So we're still kind of trucking towards the tattoo goal. It's not too far away now.
Although we might have to put a shatter pause on it depending on how long this health lockdown lasts.
Yes. Yeah. So if it happens, within the next couple of months, we'll probably have to wait on actually getting the tattoos, but we'll see what happens. Nothing new to report in terms of Gen Con, because we're all still waiting to see whether Gen Con will still actually happen. But as of now, it's still scheduled to happen, so we are still planning as if it's going to happen, and if we need to change our plans, obviously we will, and we'll let you know what we will do instead in terms of our Gen Con swag and all that kind of good stuff, and whether we'll do anything else special during that time. But for now, let's just all hope Gen Con happens and happens safely. And I think that's about it for patron stuff, unless I'm forgetting something.
Right on. So what news from the Mark?
For news, there's nothing new really from FFG other than the new product announcement has been postponed. Everyone stifle your laughter, please. It will be now announced. I said stifle it, guys.
I'm sorry.
It will now be announced on March 24th at twitch.tv/FFG Live. And of course, we have no idea what that could be. Because none of us are on Instagram.
Nope, no idea.
Moving on. As was mentioned earlier, and as I'm sure a lot of you know, especially if you're listening to this on the RSS feed, you probably have definitely heard it by now, but Quarantine Con 2020 is going on. What is Quarantine Con 2020? Well, I'm glad that you asked me. It is the brainchild of one Brian David Sandberg from Rite of Seeking, the very popular snarky blog that's related to Arkham Horror. He has a blog post on his website, riteofseeking.com, that you can check out and see this ambitious, community-driven event that's entirely online and is meant to bring us all together playing Arkham in various ways while we are all quarantined at home. And as part of this... this means that a lot of Arkham content creators are increasing the amount of content they're putting out. I know I saw Optimal Play release a couple of new videos. And also, in addition to that, the Mythos-busters are releasing new series as well on our RSS and on other RSSs that we are connected to. So, for instance, I'll jump into mine real quick and then I'll pass it over to Ian. But I started a series called Achievement Hunter that is all about me building... basically looking at the achievements that come in the Return to boxes, organizing them into campaigns, and then building decks to take on those campaigns and get those achievements playing true solo. This is an audio-only series where I'll play a game, I'll record it live, and then I'll post it on our RSS for you to listen to while you're going about your regular quarantine business. And Ian also has a series like that. Ian, you want to talk about yours?
Yeah, so for a while I've been running the Abandoned and Alone series on Twitch, which is me streaming kind of a solo investigator against various campaigns. But I know over time a lot of listeners were requesting audio versions because some people like to consume that kind of content when they're commuting or doing chores or whatever the case may be, and it's hard to watch a video when you're driving. At least you shouldn't. So
challenge accepted.
No road trip hot seat.
I was just gonna make that joke.
So I decided to launch it as an audio series. So Abandoned and Alone is going to be coming out every 2 weeks or so. And currently I'm running Solo Calvin, because I'm a masochist, against Return to Path to Carcosa. So the first episode is out where I take on Curtain Call, so you can catch that. And kind of the focus of my series, the Abandoned and Alone series, is going to be experimental decks. So usually I'm going to be probably focusing on like one card that I'm really interested in trying out, or maybe a deck idea. One that I haven't played before, ideally, and kind of putting it through a trial by fire and seeing whether it actually works. In this case, this Calvin deck, the idea is to try out the new version of On Your Own that's coming out in Return to Forgotten Age. So no allies in the deck, and just going, once I earn enough XP for that, then we're going to try that out.
Awesome.
Wow,
And-
super masochist.
Also, another Quarantine Con related event that I think is still going on. They're still in the planning stages for this. But,
But wait, Nick, before we get there,
yeah.
Scott, do you want to talk really quickly, since we're talking about Mythos-busters content, you want to talk really quickly about the revival/repurpose of the AV Club?
Yeah, sure. We're bringing back AV Club, but
Woo!
not in the way that you have known it before.
Huh?
It used to... I want that as a text alert on my phone. Huh? So it used to be our card review, deep diving card discussion thing, and it just, I don't know, it kind of fell by the wayside. And we were discussing what to do. I wanted to bring it back, but again, it's a lot of work. And Sean and I and us as a group, which I'm saying Sean and I because we recorded the first episode, we all discussed on what we want to do. And it basically, AV Club is now going to be this proverbial and nicely dumping ground of smaller topics or little things that we want to talk about. So something that might be like just a 15-minute discussion, or, you know, like, oh, I found this cool new deck, I want to talk about it. Just side chats, essentially. Instead of just chatting between whoever it is, whether it's me and Sean, Nick and Ian, Nick and Sean, you know what I mean? We're just going to record them, and we're going to put them out. And so it's not going to be super organized. It's not going to have a regular release schedule per se, but it's whenever we want to talk about something and we just get the urge to record a 20-minute conversation, we're going to put out an AV Club episode. So the newest one should be coming out in the next day or two. And it is... Should I tell a topic, Sean? Or
Yeah, sure. Why not?
Okay.
I already kind of teased it.
we talk about Preston, because we both had a couple Preston decks that we were really excited about, and we wanted to chit-chat about it. So
if you haven't done it already, go find the Miskatonic AV Club. It's a separate RSS from our regular podcast. You'll find a wealth of old card reviews on there, so you can feel free to listen to those. And then can we call it like a display shelf, like a sounding board, as opposed to maybe a dumping ground for smaller topics?
Yeah,
I think he nailed it with dumping ground.
A charcuterie board.
Yes.
Shut up.
Topics. A finely crafted and yeah.
So go check that out if you haven't already, and pay attention to all of our venues for new content, because we've all got more free time. So
a tasting menu of Mythos Busters content. There we go.
And a amuse-bouche for the regular podcast.
Oh, all right.
Sorry, Nick, you're talking about a blob thing.
Yeah, a blob thing, yeah. Which actually Scott is attached to. But the Worldwide Blob 2020 is an event.
Well, isn't everything attached to the blob eventually?
That's very true. Yeah, just give it time, guys. It is an event that's being put on. Now, Scott, I missed whose idea this was originally.
Sergey is the guy, I believe, who's running it. Sergey on our... I don't know him other than screen name Sergey.
Okay. So. Sure. But he is going to try and to do a digital online blob event. I think they're talking about using online resources to basically organize enough groups to get as big of a blob event as they can. They're in the middle of getting people to join, so there will be a link in our show notes to the announcement article for that. And if you're on our Discord, I think you can find information in our Quarantine Con channel, and I'm pretty sure that's pinned as well. And Scott is also lending a hand as far as helping to organize this event. We want to get it as big as possible, so if you're able to, please check it out and join, because Blob is a great scenario. It's really fun, and it is especially fun if you can play it in its epic multiplayer format, that's really where you see it shine. So
it's the way it was intended, for sure.
Yeah, but the way they're planning to do it is really interesting. Like a Google Doc that everyone has up, and you can play on TTS or play at home with your group, and there's going to be chat channels, and whoever's running it is going to jump from chat. Like each group will have a chat channel, and so you can, if you're playing at home, just one person, I don't know, has an earphone in or something, right? So the group leader can come by, or the event leader can come by, like, hey guys, how much damage on the blob? Okay, thanks. Like, take it off and record it. You know what I mean? Like, as Matt was walking around at Gen Con. So
yeah, that's awesome. That's really cool. So you guys have all of that different stuff to look forward to during Quarantine Con, which technically, according to the original post, today is the last day. The 20th of March is the last day of Quarantine Con. But, call me crazy, call me a doomsayer, but I have a feeling we are going to be quarantined for quite a while beyond March 20th. So, no reason why we can't continue Quarantine Con, right?
I present a motion to extend Quarantine Con indefinitely.
Carried.
Seconded.
Wait, seconded.
Yeah, okay. We don't second around here. We go right to 11.
Right. So speaking of going to 11, Scott.
It's time for you to get FAQ'd. The rules. A big FAQ update has come out. So there are quite a few things that went through here. Some minor things, obviously, as there always are. So first thing, card erratas, there's a bunch for... it's basically before the Black Throne, I think, a bunch of them. The Winchester finally uses ammo, so that's good. So I'll go over a couple of the bigger things that affect most people playing. Legal deck size. So if you add Versatile, there was a question whether you had to purchase the level 0 cards with XP. You do not. So it's 2 XP for Versatile, and now your deck size is bigger, and you just add level 0 cards to fill in, as you would if you exiled something. So it doesn't cost XP. Some people were saying, oh my god, it costs 7 XP. It doesn't. Bonded cards, you're limited to the number in a single product. So even if you buy 5 packs, you don't have that many bonded cards in your bonded area. Kind of makes sense. Myriad cards, for some reason there was a question about whether they count as 3, like if it's a single XP Myriad card, if it counts as 3 XP for all 3 in standalone, they don't. It works the same as before. The two big things is automatic success and failure, and as if, which if anyone's played Luke ever, You probably get confused about that. So, biggest thing about automatic success and failure is if an investigator knows that they succeed or fail before they reveal the chaos token, which is step 3, they basically skip that step, and all others, and step 4, which is reveal or do what the picture says on the token. You skip all that. It does not count as successful. You automatically do it. Oh, sorry. It does count as successful. So an automatic success beforehand, you just automatically succeed. So anything that says after you successfully evade or whatever, that works. If a chaos token causes that, like Wendy with her amulet out, the Elder Sign automatically makes you succeed, that's still successful as well. If an ability automatically does something, like automatically evades, like Stray Cat is the big one, especially in Patrice with the Watcher. Right. That no longer counts as successful because there is no test to it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, she has so many other ways. Like Hope, the cat from Miss Doyle, still works because if you discard Hope, this test is automatically successful.
Sure.
Key thing about these automatic successes as well, even the ones that occur before the token pull, you can commit skill cards to them, and then you just don't pull a token. So if you have like resourceful or something, right? Like so, there's and you still calculate your value of how well you did, because that might matter for like shotgun, let's say, right, where there's a scaling effect
by 2.
Yeah. So.
Interesting.
So yeah, that's the big thing on auto succeed. Like if there is a test, then you are successful or you fail. But if it just says automatically do something like evade, then it's not successful or unsuccessful. It just is.
Weird. Okay.
It's kind of a fascinating thing, and sorry to pull this slightly to the side,
Yeah.
but it's kind of a fascinating thing, and I watched it happen with Lord of the Rings, with these games where there's just mechanics that come in later that the wording gets so... I guess they're kind of unprepared for it at the beginning, and even with this game where everything was so deliberate and clean because they had so much experience, I was waiting to see, like, okay, what's the thing that is still going to be wonky because there's no way they could have seen it coming, and this feels like that. I don't know. It's just kind of it's kind of a fascinating thing to watch evolve, and I'm not even that into rules.
It's almost as if this has happened before. Okay. So, anyways, as if Luke, the game-breaking investigator. So when you're doing something as if you are at a location or whatnot, especially like playing a card or essentially doing an ability or an action is when it comes into play. You do that as if you are at a location, and it includes all steps, including like paying the cost, any attacks of opportunity, resolving each aspect of the test. Anything that triggers after that action, it still happens, but it wouldn't do... So the big thing here is if Luke played Barricade at a location, and that location had reaction after an event card is attached to this location, deal 1 damage to each investigator at that location. That would trigger, but it would not hit Luke because he's not at that location. Because it's after. Does that make sense? So that happened, he was there, and now it's a reaction after he is no longer there.
That makes sense.
The coolest one, because this was one of the first questions that came out, actually, that made everyone think, like, how does Luke work, is playing of Shortcut. So if you're, like, in your dream box, and you can play an event at any location, you can play Shortcut at that location over there, and then essentially move from that location to the next one.
Oh, I love it.
And so because you're playing as if you were there, you don't get any attack of opportunity because it's fast. But the enemies don't move with you because it's as if they're engaged, but they are not actually in your threat area. Therefore, they don't come with you. It's As If is still just...
It's wonky.
It's a good explanation. Yeah, you like this is one, like, it's kind of hard to talk about this on the cast. You need to just go read the section on it. It's a quarter of a page of the FAQ to explain As If, and then another quarter of the page for automatic success and failure. Go read those. It makes more sense as you read it, I think, but that's the Cole's
Most
notes.
things do.
Yeah. And Before the Black Throne got a bunch of erratas and changes and just things that made it work better, I guess.
Yeah.
It clarified a bunch of things.
It needed
That's a really messed up scenario. Like,
It
like
is.
I like it, but it's just like there's so many moving parts and things going on, and these little erratas just smooth things out. So, yeah, that's it for
Excellent.
rules.
All right.
You've been fact.
All right, well then, let's move it on to the main topic. Like I said, this is a bit of a revisit, but as we head into times where people are probably going to be spending a lot more time indoors and wondering what to do with said time, might be one that's worth a solid revisit. So let's talk a little bit about other games that are relevant to the interests of our listeners. You know, we have Lovecraft games down, but I feel like anything that even steps a little bit outside that would still just be relevant to anyone who's a fan of the Arkham LCG is worth part of the discussion. So, I mean, this was Nick's brainchild originally, right? I kind of want to hand it over to you.
Well, I mentioned on our last episode when Ian started talking about Arkham Horror 3rd Edition, and we kind of went back and forth on a couple different ideas. I was like, we should just devote an episode to this. And so then it came time to decide topics for this week, and I was like, we should just devote an episode to that thing I said we should just devote an episode to. And everyone was like, okay.
No one stopped me, so here we are.
Yeah, I think that sums up most of the topics that come up from me. It's like, well, no one said no, so we're doing it. The Bloodborne episode. Anyway.
Yes, please.
So, as was mentioned earlier, this is kind of a continuation of our discussion on Episode 8. In Episode 8, we talked specifically about H.P. Lovecraft stories that we would love to see or that we really enjoy, and we would like to see in the LCG or just in games in general. And this is kind of taking that and creating a side discussion, which is other Lovecraft games that we really enjoy, why we like them, if they're similar to Arkham Horror the card game or not, why you might like them if you try them. And for the record, for the games that I put on here, I know some other information was added, but the ones that I avoided were Cthulhu skins of other games. So like Cthulhu Munchkin or Cthulhu Smash Up or Pandemic Reign of Cthulhu, I think is the name of that one. Like I tried to avoid
that's particularly relevant at the moment, though.
That's true. You know, you're not wrong. But I avoided those simply because Cthulhu and the mythos in general are public domain. So literally anybody can create, and most everybody does create, because apparently you get a tax return if you do it or something. I don't know. Everybody's doing it. But you can make an expansion to your game that's Cthulhu based, and that's fine. So everybody has done it. So I'm focusing, at least with the list that I put on here, with games that are more like their own thing and that are just about the mythos whole cloth. I broke it up by different categories, and starting with other Fantasy Flight games, since those are probably going to be the most similar to the card game that we all love. I basically just went down the line and listed all of them. I think I got them all. I don't know if I missed any, but let's start with the OG granddaddy, Call of Cthulhu, the card game. Have you guys played this thing? I think Sean, you might have played it with
Fantasy
me.
Flight Games?
Well, before it even... Well, yeah, it started as a collectible card game.
That's true, but it was the first living card game as well.
It was, yeah. And did you actually play that with me or no? I can't remember if we
Yeah,
played it
we
together.
played like 3 or 4 games. And that's the extent of my experience, aside from just getting cool little bits of swag from different OP events I've attended.
Yeah. Yeah, that one was really... I really liked the resource system in that one, how you had like basically 3 different batteries that you filled as you played, and then you would drain them during your turn to do different things. It had really interesting mechanics, but I personally felt like and I remember saying this too when we played it, like probably 6 years ago at this point. I remember saying, I feel like the Cthulhu Mythos is wasted on a 2-player dueling game.
I think that's word for word what you said. I was there, Gandalf.
Ian, have you played this one before?
I have not. This is like one of those games where I can think back to like 4 or 5 occasions where I held it in a game store and was thinking about buying the starter and that set, and I just never did. So no, I haven't. I have not played it. Always intrigued by it though, just as a kind of Arkham Files type thing.
It was really fun because your deck, it did one of the things I really like when you're dealing with a universe that has like antagonist and protagonist forces. Your deck combines 2 of those, so you pick a good faction and evil faction, you mash them together. And then it also did another thing I really like in card games that we see in Arkham Horror, and that I first really noticed with the Star Wars LCG, is where every card in your deck has a use at some point. Because if you're not going to play it, it has some other aspect to it that you can then, like, so in Arkham Horror we have the skill icons, and in Star Wars they had force icons. In Call of Cthulhu they had resource icons. So you would attach a card to one of these, I can't remember what they were called, but to one of those resource batteries, and then when you would drain that battery, you would generate all the resources you had attached to it. So it was a really kind of a cool mechanic in that regard.
It really was. You kind of had to like plan ahead, and like it affected the way you built your deck. I mean, I think I've literally never built a deck for that game, but I could see how it would.
Right, totally, yeah. So that one was really fun. I want to make sure that we talked about that one. And then it's out of print now, but you might be able to find... I know I got the core set for pretty cheap, but I think some of those expansions are still... I think the prices are still kind of close to MSRP.
Yeah, every now and then I'd see it in the FFG holiday sales, but they're probably like clean those out by now. I don't know.
Yeah, right.
but yeah, the thing you bring up about like, I think it's always adds a lot to a card game when you add in that element of like a card does something else for you other than what's there, just because it prevents like your hand being filled with stuff you can't use. Like there's always a use for stuff, like whether it's skill icons. So yeah, I think maybe some of that DNA went into Arkham Horror LCG.
Totally. And from there, we go to the first, like, not the first hobby board game that I ever played, but one of the first ones that really catapulted me into this, like, family of gaming, and that would be Arkham Horror. Specifically, 2nd edition for me. I know we have 3rd edition out now. And I've never played the original, but... as far as Arkham Horror, that basically takes the idea of the Cthulhu mythos and it just focuses on the city of Arkham and moving around there. 2nd edition had less of a narrative swing to it. 3rd edition is much more narrative driven, where you're actually playing through a story as you go, which I think is really cool. Ian, you talked about this on the last episode, and you actually said that... I don't want to put words in your mouth.
Sure.
So explain your feelings of Arkham Horror 3rd edition.
Okay. So I actually broke it out again because I knew we were going to do this topic. So I wanted to revisit my feelings. So I came out of that feeling a bit more positive about it. I don't think I've changed my opinion that I like Eldritch better. But let's see. So... I do think it does a lot of things well, which is it's more streamlined than 2nd edition. Like, 2nd edition had those, I don't remember what they're called, but they're like the skill sliders, where basically you can...
I think that's exactly what they were called.
Yeah,
I remember.
You can adjust your skills within a turn, and so you can kind of adjust, like, I'm going to go more fighty, so let me adjust my strength score. And then I'm going to lower my strength score to raise this score. That's something I don't think has come up in any of the other Arkham Files games, so it's kind of interesting. So I liked it for the weird wonkiness and uniqueness, but it was also maybe a little too wonky. And sometimes it took away...
I think that's safe to say.
And it took a little bit away from the...
I don't think anyone's going to argue you on that one.
Well, I've seen some people who are like diehard 2nd ed fans who will probably... choose to die on that hill, but
that's fine. They're allowed to be wrong.
I also think it took away a little bit from the kind of individual feeling of an investigator. Like, you know, in most Arkham Files games, like, McGlenn is a bruiser who's just going to kill things. But, like, if you can lower his strength and pump up his intellect, then I don't know if it, or his lore, I guess it would be, it feels kind of weird. Anyway, that's all a lot to say that I think Arkham 3rd streamlined things a bit and a lot from second ed, and it does add in, because it's scenario based this time, that there's like a tight story. I think my qualms, my disappointments about it are sometimes feeling, so it's hard to put my finger on it, but sometimes I feel like there's just, I'm not doing enough in my term that I want to be doing, and sometimes I feel like it's because I'm getting bogged down by enemies. Like in Eldritch, you know, if you don't want to fight an enemy, like, just keep walking through their space, you know? Like, it's not a big deal, but like in Arkham, like, if you start rolling bad against enemies, then all of a sudden, because you can't take an action more than once per turn, like the attack action, like if you fail that first attack, well, you know, you can get a little bit bogged down.
Yeah, I really enjoy Arkham 3rd Edition, but I also really enjoyed 2nd Edition, even after playing Eldritch Horror, which I will agree with anybody who says Eldritch Horror is a better game than Arkham 2nd Edition. I will fully agree with them. I still have more fun playing 2nd Edition than I do playing Eldritch Horror. And that could just be because I've only ever played Eldritch Horror with like 4 or 5 players, and it just takes too long. And the board just seems to get too flooded with things to do, and it takes me a year to get across the board. But anyway,
that's my main gripe with Eldritch.
Yeah.
It's just like things will pop up, and you have to commit like a fourth of your game just to getting to one objective.
Right, yeah. And not only that, but I also just, like, it's funny because I've talked since we first got standalones in Arkham Horror LCG, which was when the game released, I have been talking about how awesome it would be to have a campaign that's just bouncing around the globe and solving different, you know, issues or solving different scenarios. And yet I find that with the board game, I prefer a scope that is just the city of Arkham, because I feel like I feel like the different locations have a better identity. Whereas when it's the whole globe, it doesn't, even though it's easy to go like, yeah, I'm in, you know, San Francisco and you're in Kamchatka and whatever, it still feels kind of like every city is just a city. You know what I mean? Like there isn't much that separates one city from the next other than you just draw a different card. Wait, do you even? I think you just draw from the city deck, don't you?
You draw from that kind of region color, but then the entry you read depends on the city. Like you'll read the Rome entry or whatnot.
Sure.
Then there are generic spaces.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, it may just be my perception. I played like probably 5 or 6 games of Eldritch Horror, so it may just be my perception of it. But I've always felt like Arkham Horror had a stronger sense of place than Eldritch Horror did, and that is a big thing for me when I'm playing these big immersive games. Is I have to feel like I'm in that world, and when it's the whole world, I don't feel like I'm in it, even though it's the world I'm in. Like question mark, I don't know. It's weird. Anyway,
which is weird because I feel like that's some of what was separating me from 3rd edition. Like I didn't feel like I was there enough, and I feel like Arkham 2nd Ed and Eldritch are very different from 3rd edition in that I mentioned this last episode, but they're more like a sandbox experience, just because of how it's structured, because it's not like a scenario that you're going to go to this and do this, and now you're going to move to this next story point. It's more like the story emerges through where you go and the encounters you have, whereas 3rd edition is more kind of, I guess it's a difference between like an open world video game and a more like tight narrative RPG video game, which both have their strengths and weaknesses.
Narrative,
you know,
or a Ludo narrative.
I will agree that 3rd edition does also feel to have like a fairly weak sense of place, again, even though it is in Arkham. And I think the modular board kind of plays into that, right, where it doesn't feel like I'm learning the city with each game I play, because the city changes. Like literally different districts that were connected in one scenario won't be connected in the next scenario. And that, even just that I know that's pretty minor in the grand scheme of things, but even just that level of abstraction is enough to kind of take me out of it. Like, one of the reasons why I love Threads of Fate is because when it reproduces Arkham, it does so in a way that still, like, you can look at the map from Threads of Fate and the map from Midnight Masks, and you can almost lay them one on top of the other and still get it to fit. Not entirely, but almost. You know what I mean? So I love that continuity, and Arkham Horror 3rd Edition, unfortunately, doesn't have that same continuity from one scenario to the next.
Yeah, and I did mention that I played 3rd and enjoyed it more this time around. It could have been because I've been playing it with 2 investigators solo, and I bumped it up to 3 and had a lot better time, even though it's controlling more investigators. I found... Because with 2, it just feels like I think that was part of feeling so constrained, is because you have to do so much with 2 investigators. You can't take time to do, like, other actions. It's just like ward over and over again to remove doom or kill. With 3, I have a little more space. And one thing that switched in my mind too is I feel like Arkham 3rd, a lot of the game is actually figuring out what space you want to end on, more so than what you're doing on your turn. And once I made that switch, I think some of the strategy came to me more. I mean, not that it's not important what actions you take, because it is, but more so even than Eldritch or Arkham 2nd, I think it's a game of, like, you really need to think about what space you want to end on, because, like, you can't just buy stuff in Arkham 3rd. You got to be on the right space to buy it, or to recover health, or because you can't just take a rest action, or to find a clue. Like, all those things, you just have to be on the right space.
Yeah, and my biggest gripe, which I've not kept that a secret, are the headline cards in Arkham Horror 3rd Edition. I think those are my least favorite aspect of that design. I think there could have been a better way to implement something like that. I think it just comes down to there's no interaction. You just draw the headline card, and it hits you, and usually it's a bad thing. Sometimes it's neutral. I don't think there are any good ones, but it's just like, oh, I guess now I take 2 horror. Like, that's great. And I'm a little like that's something that really bugs me about that game, because everything else feels like a pretty tight design around it. And those just kind of feel like, we need something that's hard. Okay, let's do something where the player can't affect it at all. So I'm not a big fan of that.
Causes you to spin wheels pretty frequently.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and it was kind of nice in Eldritch how you draw one Mythos card and it just kind of guides you through everything. And Arkham 2nd was like that too. Like, just follow the card from top to bottom with the icons. And Arkham 3rd has kind of broken that up into the token bag, which has some pluses and minuses, but I think I prefer the single card approach. I don't know.
I didn't even think about that, but yeah, like we lost the Mythos deck and replaced it with the scenario cards, whatever they're called, the archive or the codex or whatever. Yeah, and the bag of tokens. That is kind of, I didn't even think about it that way, but yeah, that's interesting that they went that route. Overall, I still think it's really fun though.
Yeah.
I've only played it. I mean, we played that one large game at Arkham Knights last year, but or 2 years ago or whatever. But I've played it solo a couple times. I really like how each investigator, they give you a choice between starting assets, and usually, not all the time because I haven't looked at all of them, but usually there's one that you would take if you're in a group and one you would take if you're solo. I kind of like that there's that level of consolation for these characters.
Yeah, and it very much feels like a party composition game to me too, like that you have to pick the right kind of party composition for each scenario, so but
is that why I keep losing?
At least that's what I found, because I finally won my first game of Arkham 3rd on like the 5th try.
I get to do that myself.
And I think it came down to that.
Oh, sure. My wife and I played 2-player against Azathoth, and we won, and then we went right to Cthulhu, which now I found out Cthulhu's the hardest one of the 4. and we just lost against Cthulhu like 3 times in a row. And then when I played solo recently, I went against Amordoth and won. So yeah.
Yeah, that was the one I finally won. I think that is, I think, definitely the most beatable out of the 3, even though they tell you to start with Azathoth, just because, like, focus on enemy management. And, like, I had Roland with a shotgun rolling, like, 10 dice. And it was...
Feels so
it was
good.
Beautiful. But I guess the last thing I'll say about Arkham Horror is just because that was also for me kind of my re-entry into the hobby after being away from gaming after Lord of the Rings the card game. I was like, okay, I'm back into gaming now with Lord of the Rings the card game. What else can I get into? Kept hearing people talk about Arkham Horror, and so I think that was probably the first game after that I bought. Yeah, so I have fond memories of that, and it's so funny because sometimes it's the small things, but one of the things I loved in Arkham 2nd Edition was the hand icons. Just because it like gives you that RPG feel. And so when I first was introduced to Arkham Horror the card game and saw that there were different icons for like accessory and hand, I was so excited. So.
Yeah. And we've compared 3rd edition to Eldritch Horror quite a bit. I don't actually own Eldritch Horror, and like I said, I've only ever played it with Sean. So, Sean, I know you're a big fan of it. What keeps drawing you back to Eldritch Horror?
That's a good question, and I don't know where I fall on the Eldritch versus Arkham 3rd continuum. Because I just haven't played nearly as much Arkham 3rd as I have Eldritch, because when I play either of them, I'm just like, well, I could be playing the LCG. Which is why I've been so quiet during this conversation. But I think the cool thing that Eldritch has going for it is that the scope is just huge. You're playing it on the world map. So where... Arkham 2nd and Arkham 3rd kind of give you this really close, zoomed-in view of Arkham specifically and, like, the different districts and neighborhoods, and you kind of have a little bit more of a specific narrative going on. Eldritch is like, oh, shit, there's some shit going down in Russia, in, like, Tunguska, which I believe to be in Russia, but now I'm not so sure that I've now said it. But... I don't know, you just kind of feel like a jet-setting crew of investigators off to solve the world's problems, and while at the same time, that's one of the things that I hate, is that the movement always seems so slow compared to how quickly things progress in that game. I do think it's pretty cool to kind of, you get to know the cities, and kind of what you can potentially do there, and you kind of, as you play it, I think it rewards a little bit more engagement and a little bit more meta knowledge than most board games do.
Sure.
I think that's mostly what keeps me coming back. That and all the interesting character combinations, honestly. Like, that's where I found my love of Diana. She's so good in that game.
I think with Eldritch Horror, like you talk about how it's like this big world-spanning adventure, and I think I would be more into that if the game felt more pulpy. I think once you give me a world map that looks like Eldritch Horrors, and it has like the map, like the board literally has images of Polaroids thumbtacked to the board. I wish it felt more like Indiana Jones and tracing the red line from dot to dot, and but because it still fits into that horror genre, it just, for me, zooming out to that level and still trying to keep it very mystery/horror, those don't meld, in my opinion. But again, you say that it kind of rewards you for that level of meta knowledge, and I just don't have that. So that could be part of it too. And
I feel like the thing about Eldritch at this point, because we should mention, like, Eldritch Horror is basically complete. Like, it has all the expansions it's going to have, at least from what FFG have said. And Arkham 3rd Edition is very much at the beginning of its life. So, I mean, we don't know what will come out for Arkham Horror 3rd, so there may come a time where it takes the cake for me. But there's just so much to dig into in Eldritch Horror, which is also potentially a weakness, because I'll admit it's kind of unwieldy now. Like, there are so many different decks. Like, there's a regular item deck, a unique item deck, a relic deck, decks for otherworld gates, and decks for each location, and sideboards. Like,
secondary maps.
Yeah.
Oh, jeez.
So, on the one hand, that's very unwieldy. On the other hand, I think that's part of why I like it. Is there's just so much to dig into and so much that can happen because there's so like all this variety of like, okay, I got this amazing relic, but now there's I think one of the things I really like about Eldritch Horror too is how it handles its conditions, like the equivalent of weaknesses in Arkham LCG, which is like there's the Dark Pact weakness, which each what's on the back is different, so you don't know what it's going to be, so maybe you'll just straight up get devoured when the dark entity comes to collect, or it's going to do sanity to you, horror damage to you. And so all of the conditions are like that, whether it's like an amnesia condition or paranoia. And I really like that kind of element of the game, that it just adds uncertainty to it. And a lot of times they'll tempt you and like, take a dark pact to do this good thing, knowing that it might come to harm you later. So that's one of the things that I don't know, it's just a common thing that I like in games is weaknesses, I guess, and how that's handled. And so in Arkham Horror LCG, again, that was another thing that when I saw there were going to be weaknesses in the decks, I was really excited for that.
I will say that that's something that when I set up and played 3rd edition recently, I was like, oh, that's right, the backside of Cursed is going to have something cool that's going to pop up. And then when I was cleaning up the game, I was like, what would this have been? And I flipped it over. I'm like, oh, it's Blessed. That's right. Yeah. They went the economical path.
Yeah.
So I just...
And the same with the spells as well. Like they had that backside. Whereas in Arkham 3rd, it's like, just take a horror, which has some cool elements to it too, but it's a bit more.
But not as cool.
Yeah, it's a bit more straightforward.
Okay, moving on to the next FFG Lovecraft game on our list. We have Elder Sign, which is one I have absolutely zero exposure to.
I liked your initial entry on the show notes. It was like, I have no idea. I've seriously never played this.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so okay, so one of the reasons why I never, and I honestly just don't have an interest in it. Well, first of all, have either of you played it?
I have.
I own it.
Yep.
I played a decent amount of the app because it's actually a pretty decent little app. Like if you're looking for something on your phone and you're tired of all the like shitty freemium games that are out there nowadays, it's a decent little app and it will definitely occupy your time. And then I ended up buying the physical game and the expansion that had Diana in it.
Sure. So, okay, so answer me this. If what I like most about Arkham is the immersion, will I like Elder Sign?
Not for that.
Yeah, probably not for that element.
Because that's why I just haven't, I haven't even made an effort to try it, is because I'm just like, it literally looks like they take everything I like about the mythos and just remove it. And so now it's just, drop down to cool art and dice.
Yeah. So. I think one of the strengths of Elder Sign is that it is very simple. Like I've played that with Lily before. It's nice and light, but the flavor comes through. I mean, you're in the museum, you still get to look at all the cool art and templating on the cards, and each investigator does feel a little bit different to play with, though some definitely feel differenter than others. Jenny is bonkers in that game, by the way. Just pro tip. But yeah, I mean, it's just one of those things where every time I pull it out, I have fun for 5 minutes. I'm like, well, I should play the LCG probably.
I think that's going to be the same down across the board for you. This is my least played of the FFG Arkham Files, but again, this is one I busted out last night to be able to talk about it more, and I played the Omens of the Deep expansion, the first time I played one of the expansions, which is interesting because it completely takes you out of the museum. For those who don't know, Elder Sign usually takes place in a museum, but this is now on a ship going out on the ocean. And so, I mean, the core mechanics are the same. This is Arkham Yahtzee. You're rolling dice and trying to match certain icons. And so I like the core mechanics of the game. But, yeah, I think because of the immersion, and I'm similar to you, Nick, in that I'm looking to these games for immersion, It's my least favorite of the Arkham Files games, which is not to say that it's a bad game. It's just that I like the other ones more because of the immersion they offer. But yeah, I think this one is more about like that you want a simpler game that you can kind of just play with friends or family and not have to worry about the complexity.
Or you just kind of feel like chucking some dice around, and it's a decent way to do it.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'll give it a try one of these days, especially because there's an app version, but just haven't done so yet.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things too, is like if I do get a hankering to play it, it's like I have the app which I can just easily access and play. But I think maybe one of the things in its DNA that goes into the LCG is like sometimes dice get sealed on certain cards, which means like the red and yellow dice are stronger, give you better results, and sometimes they get sealed on maybe a bad card and you have to unlock them, or you can kind of seal or secure them on your cards. So potentially that's kind of like something that might have gone into the seal mechanic of the LCG.
Sure. It's really fun seeing the DNA like between all of these FFG Arkham games and finding the little bits, especially with the older ones like the Call of Cthulhu card game. And I guess I don't know how old Elder Sign is, but it's so far removed from the others as far as theming, or not theming, but mechanics, that it's fun to find these little moments where you're like, oh, I wonder if that played into, the card game. Another one that I have zero experience with and also have very little desire to, which kind of feels like a faux pas or a crime even, because it's such a popular game.
It's so good.
Is Mansions of Madness. And so, okay, I wasn't, like, I played second edition, Arkham Horror 2nd Edition a lot, and then I just stopped playing it because it's so unwieldy. And everyone was playing Mansions, and I heard a lot about it, but I never had the opportunity to play it. And then we got into the card game, that came out, and now Arkham 3rd Edition is out. So in my head, I have, like, Mansions of Madness to me, from my zero exposure, feels like it's kind of like the middle ground between the LCG and the board game. And I'm kind of like, well, I have the two ends of the spectrum. Why do I need the middle ground?
Well, I think the way that I would answer that is like the LCG is kind of this blending of like RPG and card game. And I would say Mansions of Madness is a board game that's kind of a blending of board game and RPG, but really leaning heavily towards the RPG. Like, I almost view it almost as like a GM-less RPG in a way, because the app is taking on the role of the GM. Right. And I think it's that element that really hooks me on Mansions of Madness and makes me want to play it more. Like, in terms of like the strategy of the game, there's definitely strategy in it, but I would say not as much as like the LCG or Eldritch Horror or Arkham 3rd. Actually, it's more about the experience of like going through the story, and because sometimes some of the story elements and etc., the randomness can be unfair, but it's more like you're going through this story and that's unfolding before you. It's kind of how I would think of Mansions.
Sure. Sean, have you played Mansions of Madness? First or second ed?
I have 2 games of second ed under my belt, and that is it. It's. I think that's pretty fair what Ian said. Is it feels kind of like a GM-less Arkham version of. I've played more Descent. That's my stronger frame of reference, and a little bit of Imperial Assault. They're all kind of. They're similar enough that I think the comparison can be drawn. I enjoyed them, but the fact that I didn't immediately rush out and buy the game told me again that I'd probably rather be playing the LCG. I have a problem, okay?
Well, and it doesn't help that like these big box mini, like scenario based mini games they have such a high price point to get into. Like after we played Imperial Assault, my first takeaway from Imperial Assault was this game needs to be streamlined, and my second takeaway was I want to own this game. But it's $100 for that base box, and I was like, God, that is not. I do not want to part with that much money. Like, I didn't love the game that much, and that's kind of my concern with Mansions, is that it's such a high price point. I don't remember if it's 100 or it might be less than that now, but it's because it's so much considerably higher than like the card game, which is only $40 to get into. It's just harder to pull the trigger on that. So
that's definitely fair. As one is the price element, which is not nothing, and two is the organizational element. Like trying to figure out how to store and organize all these minis and tiles is definitely a thing.
Yeah.
If Elder Sign is the one I've played the least, Mansions is probably the Arkham Files game I've played the most, other than the LCG. And I think it's because I too, Sean, fall into the thing sometimes of like, I really want to just be playing the LCG instead. And I feel like because Mansions feels so different because of the app, and even though sometimes it's like playing out stories that are very similar to what we've seen in the LCGs, it feels the most different to me than the LCG. That like, I think that's why I go back to it, because I'm like, okay, this is actually offering me something different. That I don't feel like I'm wasting my LCG time.
It is precious.
It is.
Yeah. Game time in general. So then let's move on to the last of the FFG Arkham games that I have on the list here, which is another one that I have zero exposure to. This one was just released last year, and I remember when it was announced, I just looked at the elevator pitch for it, and I was like, no thanks, and never paid any other attention to it. But this is Arkham Horror Final Hour. The whole selling point behind it being that it's a lower investment, quick to play, quick to learn, that sort of thing. That it actually has a time limit, if I'm remembering that correctly. So that like games don't take longer than whatever. I think it might be a half hour, 45 minutes or whatever. But that's kind of cool, since all the other Arkham games are so meaty, you know.
I think Ian has the most experience. I've yet to play a single game here. So.
Okay.
And by most experience, I've played it once.
But you bought it last
I
year,
did
right?
buy it, and
Nights?
I've played it the
Okay.
once, which is just kind of par for some of my games that I buy. I mean, I still have some games in shrink, so Final Hour shouldn't feel too bad.
I have opened all my games because I hate seeing them in
Sure.
shrink, but then they still just sit on the shelf.
I was actually wrong. This is the Arkham Files game I've played the least, but it's I think I made that mistake because I kind of don't think of it as an Arkham Files game, actually.
Oh,
Like, it has the
Well, that's-
characters, it has the setting of Arkham and the locations, but it's just so different. It's like if you took some kind of area control, almost Euro type game, not quite, but you kind of get along the lines of what I'm trying to communicate, and put the Arkham Files theme on it. So I think if you're not too tied to wanting that Arkham Files immersion experience, I think there's a decent game in there. The main mechanic is, like, in multiplayer at least, is you each are kind of playing down these action cards, but you're playing them blindly. And they each have kind of a value, and that value determines whether you resolve the top half of your card or the bottom half, which do different things. And so I really want to try it multiplayer because that seems interesting.
Sure.
But I don't know. I can't say I love it that much, at least for solo. Like, if someone asked me for my recommendation, I probably wouldn't recommend it, to be honest, unless they were looking specifically for that type of game. But if they're like, oh, I'm an Arkham Files aficionado, like I am, because I own all the Arkham Files stuff, like, that's why I say I don't really consider it part of the Arkham Files in a way.
Sure. And it's funny, totally unrelated, but you mentioned how everyone plays their actions blindly, and then that can influence, like, the turn. It just makes me think of, I just heard about an RPG recently that's the players all play raccoons who are driving a race car, and everyone chooses an action, and then all that, without talking to each other, and then all the actions are resolved simultaneously. So the car is like accelerating but braking and turning to the left, and like, it's so. Anyway, yeah, Final Hour, just, it didn't do any. It did absolutely nothing for me when I saw it announced. Like I didn't hate it. I just had no interest in it, and unfortunately, that continues to this day. So
I
Yeah,
just feel like the space is so crowded as is. Like the game's got to be doing something really cool and distinct to stick out.
yeah, well, and I think, and I could very well be wrong, but I think I would have been a little bit more interested in it if it was not an Arkham Files property. Like if it was its own thing, or maybe even if it was like a Netrunner themed game, I would
Sure.
probably have more interest in it. But I think, again, I've even talked about this with games that are well established like Mansions. I feel like my particular Arkham itch is being scratched by the few that I have. So seeing another one come out in there, it either has to really break the mold, or it's just not going to be high on my priority list.
and I think what brings, if it doesn't bring people to the Arkham Files, I think it's at least one of the main elements that people really love the Arkham Files for is the investigators. Like, they've all been built up through these different games and have their unique backstories and kind of abilities. But in Final Hour, that doesn't really come through at all. That differentiation of the investigators. Like, they don't, when you're playing them, they don't really feel that different from each other. So, yeah, I think that's another kind of strike against it.
That's too bad.
Yeah. Well, before we move on to the non-FFG games, I'm kind of curious, does the Arkham Files games that FFG has, is everything covered? Is there any other kind of game you guys could see that doesn't exist?
Like, is there one that they could release that isn't already...
Yeah, because you have these different, like, Mansions is covering the RPG elements, like Arkham 3rd and Eldritch have this kind of broader scope. LCG is a card
Well,
game.
I mean-
Like, is there something they could release that fills something that's not already being filled?
I mean, I'm going to fill the Mythos Busters bingo card and say I would buy an Arkham Files RPG in a heartbeat. Even if it were Genesis, which I am on record saying I don't care for the Genesis system. If they made an Arkham Files RPG that was Genesis at this point in my life, I would probably pick it up. I probably wouldn't run it necessarily, but I would love to have it
Yeah.
to peruse and to mine for ideas and everything. So
I would too.
I think there might be space for a game that has no map at all, that has no board.
like Elder Sign?
But that still kind of has challenges that you place down.
Yeah, it's
like it
kind of
still
a
kind of
map.
has. There's kind of a map board presence to it. I'm thinking something closer to, I mean, dare I say it, Munchkin. Not necessarily like Munchkin, but something with those types of mechanics where everything is kind of transient and quick, and you're just playing cards, and you know your character has specific abilities and how you interact with those things. It's something quicker, something not necessarily just straight up simpler, but I feel like something a little bit more condensed. There might be space there more than another version of us exploring Arkham with a board and investigators and clues and
Sure.
horror and sanity and, you know.
Yeah. I kind of like my ideal Arkham game would be like a mashup between the board game and the card game, where like the base game would be the board and the pieces and maybe some cards, and then the expansions would be almost like an LCG. Like every month they released a new deck of cards that you can adjust. So basically, like build your deck like you do for the LCG with your investigator, but you're playing on a board. Like that to me would be the perfect marriage. It'd probably be clunky as all get out, but that's what I would love to see. Network 57 in chat says, "What about Arkham Wargame?" That is as far from what I want as anything. Like when I think of Cthulhu Mythos and Arkham Horror, I don't want to think about moving my units across a battlefield and calculating, my offense versus their defense and stuff like that. Ugh.
I bet the minis would be gorgeous, though.
Oh, probably. Well, isn't there one that exists that's an Arkham? It's not on the list here because my brain farted and I couldn't think of any.
The Cthulhu Death or some. I remember it too. It was a Simon game.
Oh
Is
yeah.
it like Cthulhu Wars? Is that it?
Yes,
Cthulhu Wars,
Cthulhu Wars. Yep. Death May Die, which we'll transition to that one now. Cthulhu Death May Die. I think that is a Simon game.
Yes. Yep.
But Sean and I had the opportunity. Now, that was one where when I heard about it again, I was like, ugh, like another mini skirmishing game. We don't need this. But Sean and I had the opportunity to play it a couple months ago when Matt brought it to his place, and I was super impressed with it. Like,
it was quite fun.
Way more than I expected. Oh my god, it was so fun because it took that idea of like mythos horror and it totally went. And Matt brought this up. He's like, they said multiple times, like, we said, if a question is not, can I kill Cthulhu with a shotgun? Then let's make that question, can I kill Cthulhu with a shotgun? And that's really what it feels like. It's super fun. We played like 5 players, but it didn't seem to go too slowly. Like the board was really dynamic and we were always moving around a lot and doing a lot on our turns. I really enjoyed it. This is another one that I would get if it weren't for the price point of entry.
I haven't gotten a chance to play it. I really want to try it. I remember when it came out on Kickstarter, I was so close to backing it because, it's another mythos type thing. The mechanics seemed cool, but because of that price point, and it was also a time when I had backed a bunch of Kickstarters, which is a day ending in Y. I was like, okay, I'm gonna be good and not back it. And I also was kind of, because sometimes I haven't heard great reviews of other CMON games, so I was a little bit skeptical. And then when this one came out, I think I've heard, quite a few people talking about it in various forums, and like 90% of the time the comments have been positive. And so that kind of blew me away that the reaction has been that positive to it. So at some point I'll have to try it.
Yeah, totally. And I totally agree that I'm usually pretty lukewarm on CMON's general, like how they design in the past. Matt said that there was a different, I can't remember what the guy's name was, but he said that there's a well-known game designer that recently joined CMON, and he's kind of the one who helmed Death May Die, and I can't think of his name off the top of my head.
Eric Lang.
But that could be the reason. Eric Lang, yes, thank you. And that could be the reason why I enjoyed
that
it
guy.
more.
Never heard
that
of him before.
That guy, Jesus. Anyway, can anybody think of any other non-FFG mythos games that are really standout, ones that you really enjoy? Or
I think I'm pretty loyal to the FFG Arkham file. I know there's a lot out there that I've heard talked about, and because I haven't experienced them myself, I don't think I can really talk about. Like, I know there's this card game Arkham Noir that I see talked about a lot, and kind of solo board game groups, but I have not touched it, so I don't know.
Neither have I.
What about that game that's just Kerplunk with Cthulhu tentacles?
Let's talk about that for 45 minutes.
Again, the kind of thing I was trying to avoid when I was making the show notes. Okay, so let's talk about role-playing games. And I put the 4 that I'm familiar with. There are a ton, but I put the 4 that I'm familiar with on here. And the first of those would obviously be Call of Cthulhu. Which has, how many editions are there of that? 6 or 7 at this point?
Right now, yeah.
Oh my god, I have the 5th edition core rulebook. I've only played it like
How much
twice.
could they possibly change?
Well, and the core system is really simple and very, like, I think it's pretty elegant.
Yes,
it's just a percentile system, and it's super straightforward. But yeah, it's one of those, again, I bought it because I've got the Cthulhu RPG around the same time that I got Arkham Horror 2nd edition, was kind of when I was really getting into the mythos and all that. So again, I got it like I get most of my RPG books, just to mine it for ideas and to page through it and admire the art and that sort of thing.
Same.
Yeah.
I still want to run it or play Call of Cthulhu. But yeah, I think it's one of those systems where you can run it super simple, just like run it mostly theater of the mind and just keep to the skill test type things, or they have these like elaborate combat and chase rules that you can use if you want. I think me personally, I'd probably keep it more simple, but One of the mechanics I know this exists in other RPGs, but one of the mechanics I like in Call of Cthulhu is the kind of push your luck element that you can choose to. I forgot the exact term for it, but if you fail a check, you can choose to push it. But if you fail the pushed roll, then something really bad is going to happen to you. So I always like those kind of mechanics. That would be cool to see.
Balls to the wall in it.
Yeah, like it'd be.
Yes, that's exactly what it's called.
That's the exact heading of the section is balls to the wall.
Wall balls.
But that would be cool to see something like that on the LCG, like a card that you can, fail, but you can try to retake a skill test. But if you fail that, then you're gonna splatter.
Sounds like a rogue card.
It does.
Yeah, so that's one that I haven't, or I've played a couple times, but I would love to. That was a while ago. I'd love to try that one again. Monsters and Other Childish Things I put on there. I know I've talked about this one on the cast before. This one is it's loosely Cthulhu related. Really the closest that it gets to being Cthulhu related is there's a stock monster in the book that's a teddy bear called Yogg So Soft.
Yeah, but your GM could easily drag it that
Exactly.
way. Very
exactly.
Easily.
Mm-hmm. And I definitely liked the idea of it leaning more in that direction. And the one campaign that I bought for it is called Road Trip, and that one is very Cthulhu-esque or Mythos-esque. The elevator pitch of Monsters and Other Childish Things is that everyone plays
Stranger
kids.
Things, guys.
Well, yeah, it's Stranger
With
Things, but
monsters.
it's cooler, yeah, because every kid has their own monster, and the monster has like all these superpowered abilities, but the GM role plays the monster, so they're also super crazy and they do their own things. Yeah, Network, it's kind of like Pokemon, except for you have one Pokemon that is unique to you and nobody else has that Pokemon. Like, that's kind of what it is. And also your Pokemon can talk, and your Pokemon wants to, like, give you everything that it can, and it wants you to be happy. So sometimes, like, the kid will be like, man, I hate homework. So then the Pokemon will go to the school and eat the teacher so you don't get homework anymore. That's the kind of stuff you do with Monsters and Other Childish Things. And that is one I would run in a heartbeat, like, if we had a group to play it. Because I love that game. Couple others on here that I added because I own them, but I've never played them. The first one is Cthulhu Dark, which is a very rules light. I think the rules are on a trifold brochure, so super rules light. And that's one where everything is just resolved by D6s. You roll 1 when you attempt something. You roll a second D6 if you're trained in it, and you roll a third one if there's some other trigger. I can't even remember what it is, but it's super rules light, very narrative focused. And again, it fits on a brochure. All the rules do, so that one's kind of fun. And then Silent Legions is the biggest selling point, in my opinion, about Silent Legions is that the entire back half of the book is all about generating your own mythos pantheon. So like rollable tables for creating gods and outer gods and elder gods, and it's like you can either have a single one or you can have like multiple pantheons that are vying for power, and then all the cults that come about from those are all, you can generate those as well. So I really loved Silent Legions for that kind of modular aspect to it. I have no idea what the system is like because when I bought it, I didn't even look at any of that stuff. I went right to the back of the book and was looking through all those tables and coming up with my own names and everything for these gods. It's really, really interesting, the level of customization there. But then we'll move on to a subject that I think we'll have more discussion about, which are Mythos video games. So of the three of us, who all has played Call of Cthulhu Dark Corners of the Earth?
Not me.
I haven't played it. I watched a partial playthrough.
Okay. All right. So then I'm the only one who's actually had hands-on experience. This one, in my opinion, of the ones that at least I have linked or listed here, this one is the one that I think really captured what I want out of the mythos the most. In like, it has a nice amount of action, but that action serves as like the release to this crazy buildup of tension, you know, for the hours before that. The only problem with this game is that it's super janky and it's hard to find a build that is reliable and that won't just randomly lose your save information, which is a problem when you're playing video games to suddenly not have a save file.
Sure is.
But from there, we have the more recent one that was just called Call of Cthulhu, which I know Ian played.
Yes. Yeah. I played that in one of the rare video games these days that I actually beat. So that probably says something about it, that I enjoyed it enough to play it to completion. This one I know has kind of gotten some mixed reviews. Some people really like it. Some people were more lukewarm on it, at least certain elements. I overall enjoyed it. I think the kind of story was interesting enough and had enough like cool moments to keep my interest. There were certain sections, like there were these stealth sections that I didn't really like, and is kind of a common complaint of people about the game. But that wasn't because it didn't feel kind of coherent with the rest. Like, I'm not playing a Cthulhu game to be like Metal Gear Solid, like stealthing around, you know, like the investigation parts of the game were really cool, and I want to be doing more of that and like talking to people. So when it focused on that, then I thought it was good. But I know I've seen lots of sales now and then for getting it pretty cheap, so I think if you can get it on a sale, I think it's worth playing through.
And I remember, because I didn't play it, but I did watch an LP of it. And I don't think I'm spoiling anything by saying this, but I really liked their design of the Dimensional Shambler.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, which I think that's one of the very few monsters, if I remember right, in that game. But when it came out, I was like, "Ooh, that's interesting," because of course, the only dimensional shambler that comes to mind for me is the FFG, original art of it, where it as as Sean would put it, it looks like swole ET. So
that's not how I like my ET.
Right? Yeah.
Far less inviting that way.
But yeah, moving on from there, another recent one that I didn't play. I guess I don't know if you guys did. Did either of you play The Sinking City?
I started playing it. I have it, and I fell off on playing it. And I don't feel like I played enough of it really to comment too much about it. It definitely had some cool atmosphere for it, and so it's more open world than the Call of Cthulhu game, which is probably why I stopped playing it, because sometimes when I start getting the feeling like this is going to be a major time sink, it kind of discourages me from it to keep going.
Sure.
But at some point I need to go back to it. But kind of the setting is cool because it's almost like a... well, it's in the name, Sinking City, but it's a Venice-type city, so a lot of the times you're, like, going across sections of water in a boat and, like, investigating these abandoned areas, so... the one takeaway I had from it is that it does have this feeling that you can kind of come across, like, weird stuff anywhere, like... Oh, I see a weird light from this house. Let me go investigate what's in there. And it has that open world feel that you don't even know if it's part of a mission or not, or if it's just some weird thing you came across. So that's kind of cool.
That actually sounds way more interesting than what I thought this game was. Because this is made by the same people that made Until Dawn, which Until Dawn is really good. And I highly recommend you play it, but it's also the kind of game that, like, I don't want a lot of, because the gameplay is literally just, like, walk around, look at stuff, and then have QuickTime events. So there isn't as much meat in the gameplay mechanics as what I wanted, but knowing that Sinking City is an open world, like that, I think is enough added on to that formula that would make me interested in it. So that one I might actually look at getting.
Yeah, I know kind of the one weakness of the game that people pointed out was like the combat system, which I didn't play enough of it to really get to grips with it, which isn't always a deal breaker for me. Sometimes a game can have not the greatest combat system, but if the rest is interesting enough, but yeah.
The last two on the video games list that I put on here, I removed a couple just because the discussions would be super small. One was Cthulhu Saves the World, which is a mobile game that's a JRPG where you play as Cthulhu, trying to prove that you're a hero so that you can get your powers back and then devour the world. And the other one, I can't even... Oh, Achtung Cthulhu, which is a tactical World War II Mythos-inspired or Mythos-infused World War II experience, which I haven't played but looks super cool.
I've had that on my Switch wish list. Wow, that was tough. Since I bought it, but I still have not fired off on it.
Yeah, and I keep seeing it on the PlayStation Store, but I still haven't picked it up. And every time I look at it, I'm like, oh, this looks... Because one of the scenarios that I created for my old-ass RPG back in the day was a World War II Cthulhu-style scenario. So I'm like, this looks
confirm.
Exactly... Yeah, this looks exactly like what like what I want. But for some reason, I just haven't bought it yet. So I took Octung Cthulhu off the list. But anyway... Eternal Darkness, Sanity's Requiem is another one. I put this up there with Dark Corners of the Earth as like my prime. Like when I think of games that encapsulate what I want out of the mythos, Sanity's Requiem is at the top of that list. Have either of you played that?
Nope.
It's an N64 game.
No,
or
it's a
sorry,
GameCube
game. Yeah.
I've again watched parts of a playthrough, but have not played myself.
Okay. Well, I'll keep it short then. But Sanity's Requiem is this huge story that spans multiple characters across different eras in history. And it's really cool because you start off in like prehistory as this, not prehistory, but in like the Roman Empire era. And the character you play in that prologue ends up becoming the antagonist for the whole game, and that's not a spoiler. You figured that out by the time you finish the prologue. But he becomes the primary antagonist for the whole game, and he gets trapped in this temple where there's these three elder gods, and they're not Cthulhu mythos; they're all proprietary. But you choose which one of the three to release, and then that one is now like that's the type of enemies that you're facing in the campaign. And I watched a playthrough where they chose one, and then when I played it emulated on my PC, I chose a different one. And the cutscenes are different because there's different voice actors depending on which god you picked, and the enemies are different, like they have different strengths and weaknesses. So it's really like that. It has that level of replayability to it. But on top of that, you're playing, again, across multiple eras with tons of different characters, all of whom have their strengths and weaknesses. The magic system is modular, so you actually build your spells that by combining different runes. So anyway, I'm not going to go too much more into it, but super fun. If you can play that on the PC, if you can find a way to emulate it or get a hold of it, if you have a GameCube and you want to drop the $100 or whatever they're charging for that game now, do it because it's super fun.
Sounds fun.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I highly recommend it. And then the last one on the list, I put it at the end because I think
here we go.
If we haven't run out of things to say about it, I would be surprised. But Bloodborne.
No, this is the part where I get to talk. I get to talk now.
Yes. So Sean, you take it away on Bloodborne.
So this is really the game that has recalibrated my. Like on a greater sense, and I've mentioned this before, but I'll say it again. It has recalibrated, or it has at least played a part in recalibrating my relationship with struggle in games, with difficulty in games. Because I went a long time being the kind of person who's just like, it's unfair. Just like fucking feed it to me, Pablum. I just want to experience the story. I don't. Like I spent a long time in that mode, and I couldn't even tell you why, but it was just what it was. And then along came Bloodborne, and was the gateway drug to finally kind of like really re-engaging with games and bothering to put in the time to get good and decide whether or not that the system that you had to get good at was worth the time you put in. And it is. Spoiler alert.
Super worth it.
But the Bloodborne itself exists kind of within the Souls universe, or within the Souls pantheon of games, I guess, not storyline within the same universe. But man, it is just such a solid little game. The atmosphere is perfect. The weapons are fun. What can I say that hasn't been said before? And it is very, very relevant to, though it starts off very apparently kind of Victorian. What's the proper horror for like werewolves and vampires? Is that
well? I think I would classify it as Georgian Gothic horror.
Wow, that's far more adjectives than I was expecting, but that totally makes sense. Georginian. Wow. Okay, that's the show
Because
title.
it's like post Victorian era. You know what I mean? It's like the King George era. So
Sure. Anyway, really, really, really good game. And despite it starting out that way, it is very relevant to the interests of someone who's invested in the mythos of H.P. Lovecraft. There are many things in the later part of the game that pull from that, and so it happens to be Justin and I had a game of Arkham set up last night. But I was so brain burned from work and the kid being home for, like the 10th day in a row. And I was just like, dude, I just don't have Arkham in me. Can I just sit and drink beer while you play Bloodborne and I'll coach? So we did. So Justin is now playing Bloodborne. And,
awesome.
And the hard part about those games is there definitely is a kind of learning curve. There's a hill to climb to just get in tune with what it wants you to do and how it wants you to engage with it. So I wanted to be there for the initial part of it to kind of coach him through and be like, all right, here's what you need to look at. Here's what you need to do. Make sure you read those item descriptions, pay attention, blah, blah, blah. And then he's texting me today about finding the sewers and going up against Father Gascoigne for the first time with too many blood echoes on his person. And holy fuck, I won't make that mistake again. And it warmed my heart. They're such good games. Okay, I'm done.
They
now.
really are.
Of
all the games, of all the games that I've thrown at you, Sean, and been like, you need to play this. You really need to play this. I'm so glad that not only did you play Bloodborne, but you latched onto it as hard as I did. That's one that I have never uninstalled from my PlayStation, and I don't expect to.
Samesies.
Because there's always a time when I want to go back to it and try a different build. Like I'm doing a Strength Arcane build that I started a couple months ago, and now that I have time at home a little bit more, I might actually dig back into it.
Nice.
And it also seems like it's the game that... This sounds weird, because it's a single experience. There's not, like, different campaigns. But it seems like that single experience is so deep that there's always more to discover in the game. Did you see the new trick that speedrunners are using in Bloodborne that was just discovered, I think, like a month ago?
No.
Or maybe a few months ago?
What is it?
It's a wall clip. So there used to be a clip that you could do to get to the forest early, and that's been since patched out. That was discovered pretty early on. And I think there was one, I think it was recent, but it may be older than that. But anyway, where right away in the game when you start and you have no weapons, you know how there's that very first werewolf that you face that usually kills you, and that's where you get sent to the dream to get your first weapon.
And the best you can do is slap it and slap it again, and I slap
Exactly. Well, you can kite that werewolf back up the stairs to the room where you started. And at the top of the stairs, if you can trigger its grab while you're up against the wall, it will actually push you through the wall out of bounds. And then you can from there run out into the forest and go that way. So you're skipping about 20% of the game. So anyway, like the fact that was discovered fairly recently is just, that boggles my mind, because I thought people had scoured every single inch of this game, but apparently
6 years after release.
Yeah, and like the stuff that people find in like the game files and like unused voice or unused lines and everything like that, like content that was cut, bosses and stuff like that. It's, oh my god, it's just so, this game is insane and I love it. I love everything about it, and now I just want to go play it.
I might.
Yeah, right. Oh man,
Ian will get you eventually.
Ian, yeah. Come on.
I like how we both turned on him at the same time. Ian's like, oh shit.
Eventually, once I can start clearing out my game queue a little bit one day.
Yeah.
This is worth scooting ahead in the line.
I think so too. So yeah, that's our long and short of it for Lovecraft related games. Again, the weight of it is on FFG, because I think they have probably some of the most impactful, or at least the most the ones that we gravitate to the most in the market currently. But there are some other good ones out there.
We forgot the ultimate Lovecraftian game, Mass Effect.
I was just thinking that. It was in my head. I'm like, oh shit, I forgot to talk about Mass Effect.
All roads lead back to Mass Effect.
I will always be down for a Mass Effect discussion. Sadly,
Talk about
I think
a game with deep lore.
Right. Sadly, I think my favorite of the Mass Effects is also the least Lovecraftian of them all, and that's the second one. But yeah, definitely like the God, are they called Reavers or Reapers? I can never remember.
Reapers.
They're the Reapers. Okay.
Reavers is Firefly.
Yeah, they're both such quasi-common sci-fi names that I just kind of blend them together. But yeah, like their whole role in that universe is very Lovecraftian.
Yeah, especially the first game where you're like finding out what is at the bottom of it, and like the first time you find that truth behind what's actually coming for the galaxy. Yeah, it's a very Lovecraftian moment.
Yeah, and the fact that they're like living machines is a nice twist on it. Like they're not just giant cosmic organisms, but they're constructs to a degree. That was really cool. Yeah. Oh God. Now
I know. I'm gonna go play Mass Effect now.
I mean, we're due for a remaster of that trilogy, so here's hoping.
Yeah, I wish. I would love that. I would just love not even a remaster, just a re-release 2 on the PS4. Like that's all I want. But
yeah.
Anyway.
Also, it's worth pointing out. Yeah, never mind. We'll just stick it with Mass Effect. That's a good way to end. We're fine.
Apparently, it's not worth pointing out.
No. Pivot. All right. Excellent. Well, go check those out if you're under quarantine. Let's move it on to a little bit of technical time. And before you drop off or pause, because I know many of you will, what did I want to mention before technical time? There was a thing that has escaped me in the 5 seconds it took me to intro it. Oh yes, our scavenger hunt. Yeah. we should have done this at the beginning. Here it is at the end. So congratulations to the 6 of you who made it through to this point. We are, during Quarantine Con, hosting a Mythos-Busters scavenger hunt. So if you find yourself with a little bit of extra time to consume audio content, we are putting on a contest whereby if you go back and listen to a few old Mythos-Busters episodes for certain things that we are all individually want to do, and send us timestamps of those things, you're going to get entered in a contest. We've got a lot of different swag we're giving out, and anyway, we're just trying to make it a fun time to enjoy some more content during this down period, because oh boy, I'm hopeful, but I'm seeing it get worse before it gets better. Anyway, so to that point, I want to use my technical time to do something a little offbeat. So as people head into looking at quarantining themselves, whether it's self-quarantine or whether we eventually get to a forced quarantine, I want to throw out a few tips for you guys to stay sane from a very experienced work-from-homer. So just a couple of small tips, and like there are guides and guides written on this sort of thing out there. So if this is the sort of thing that interests you, definitely go look at it. There's way more detail you can get into. But just a couple of short tips I wanted to throw out there for people who are not used to being at home. Because I feel like a lot of people, and Ian, you can correct me if you've had a different experience here. I feel like a lot of people who cannot or have not worked from home ever really kind of fetishize it and don't realize that it is cool. And don't get me wrong. Yes. There are lots of good things about being able to work from home, but there are downsides too. So there are just a few things that I would recommend that people do while they're quarantined if they've never been in this situation before. First, keep a structured schedule. Keep waking up at the same time. Keep going to bed at the same time. It's very important. Otherwise, you just start to live by your whims, and anyone who's done that for any period of time knows that that's generally just bad news. Keep active and work out if you can. Like, I know we're social distancing, but go for a walk. Get Insanity. Like, just sweat your ass off in your living room if you can. Ring Fit, I hear, is quite fun. Constantly. Get VR and Beat Saber, I guess. Like, just do something. Keep your meal windows strict, because Ooh, I don't know about you guys, but when I'm 5 feet from my cupboard too often,
it's dangerous.
That can just get away from you if you're not actually being vigilant and thinking about it.
If I'm not careful, my desk drawer at work
Right.
is full of candy and junk food that I don't need and shouldn't have. So yeah.
Exactly. I mean, there's that quote from Dune that I loved so much, and now I'm going to misquote, but the basic gist of it is, yes, that one too. But proximity to indulgence, proximity to pleasure encourages overindulgence, and that is just such a real thing. So just try to keep deliberate about it. Otherwise, everyone's going to gain weight, and not the good kind of weight, the weight you don't want. And then socialize however you can. Get on our Discord, guys. We're chatting constantly. People are talking about the quarantine. We've had some interesting discussions. Just get on, and like we have to keep social distance, but that doesn't mean there has to be social silence. So get out and do that. And then the last thing is get off the internet once in a while. Stay out of the news cycle. Like, there is so much doom and gloom out there to consume if you want to chase it, and it can leave one feeling really, really hopeless sometimes and really, really anxious, and you just got to give yourself a break. So even though you could just spend all 24 hours on the news cycle or on Reddit or wherever it is that you consume your doom and gloom, get off it. It's healthy for you. All right, I'll step off my soapbox now. Hopefully someone got some value out of that, but that's a few tips that I would highly recommend looking at for someone who's not used to being locked up in their house for long periods of time. Ian.
Well.
Oh, Nick, what's been grabbing you?
Nope. Go to Ian. I've been talking a lot this episode, so let Ian take it.
Okay. As a long-time work-from-home person, I'll second everything Sean said, and I need to be better about the social media part because I'm so tapped into social media all the time for various reasons, and I'm also someone who struggles with anxiety a lot, and like the past few days have been just so wearing that like I'm trying to be more mindful about disconnecting, and thank God for tabletop games because a lot of my nights during this past week I'm like, I am not looking at anything at all. I'm just playing a game, I'm reading a book, like I'm just unplugging because I'm gonna get driven crazy. Okay, but as far as actual technical time content, I'm almost done. I'm about 3/4 watching the Color Out of Space movie that came out recently, starring Nicolas Cage, and I'll have to talk about it more next week. Maybe you guys can watch it too, because then we can talk about it. But it's out on digital now. But so far,
where does it? Okay. One thing, where does it fall on the ridiculousness on the Cage spectrum?
Well, keep in mind that I'm not all the way at the end, but it starts like on the more normal end of Cage, and it slowly starts ramping up throughout the movie, as you might expect.
Has he gotten to badass levels yet? Or kick-ass levels yet?
Not quite, but I'm expecting him to go full crazy Nicolas Cage by the end of the movie. Yeah, but I'm really digging it so far. Obviously, how it ends will determine overall, but the soundtrack is great, and the atmosphere. Obviously, they've changed a lot from the story, but this is also like a modern version of it. It's set in the present day, that kind of thing. But yeah, I think because of kind of the cinematography and the soundtrack and all that, and wherever they shot it this was the perfect setting for it. I'm not sure exactly where geographically they shot it, but they really, I feel like, are kind of nailing the atmosphere of the story in a cool way. So yeah, I'll give my full review next time, but for now I'd recommend checking it out.
I was super excited for it, and then I read an article that, and I don't know, I know the story. I don't know why this surprised me, but I read an article that just described something that happens in the film, and I was like, oh no, I don't think I can watch it now. Like, I used to, like, kind of chuckle at Sean and his whole like, man, once you become a father, like it makes certain things hard to watch. And I was like, whatever, old man. And now I'm like 110% in that camp. Like,
Yeah, I feel you.
I'm
on
sorry,
that.
there's a child that's within earshot of Jeopardy. I don't know if I can consume this media.
Oh God, playing the beginning of Last of Us fucking destroys me every time.
Yeah.
That's a real thing for sure. Like there's I get that. I think more so with like news stories that are just like, nope, not gonna read
Yes.
that.
Yes. No,
I'll
agreed.
be skipping over that for my own mental health today. But speaking of kind of parent stuff, the other thing on my docket is I've been listening to an RPG play podcast, and this one is called Dungeons and Daddies. And it's funny because their caveat at the beginning of every episode is, this is a D&D podcast, not a BDSM podcast.
Porque no lo.
But
That's one we'll
I
start.
find it really entertaining D&D podcast. Definitely more on the comedic side, but they are actually sometimes people try to do the comedic play podcast and they're actually not very funny, but they are genuinely funny. I've been laughing out loud a lot when I'm like cleaning my house late at night under quarantine and listening to Dungeons and Daddies. And then after the first episode, I recognized their names and I realized they're the people who did the web series Video Game High School, which I enjoyed. And so I was like, okay, now it makes sense why they're so funny, because they have that kind of same sense of humor. So if you're looking for something to take your mind off of everything and listen to some fun D&D kind of stories and jokes, then I recommend that one.
Nice. All right, well, I think we'll wrap this guy up. So hopefully next week doesn't bring the alien invasion or the apocalypse, but we'll just, we'll stay vigilant. Everyone stay safe out there, and everyone pay attention for our extra content that's coming out. We're trying to pump out more things with our free time and hopefully allow all of our listeners a little bit more content to consume, because, boy, there's more time to consume it. So thanks, everyone, for joining us for episode 79 of Mythos Busters. We'll catch you for 80.
Bye.